think somewhere to sit and somewhere to eat are probably the two things of like, what are you going to want to go do outside? Somewhere to sit and somewhere to eat. Because if you can sit and watch your kids play, that's a win. I don't know how you are, but I rarely just like sit to sit. But I will sit to eat, and I will sit sometimes to watch my kids. I think if you don't know where to start with, okay, what do I want to focus on first? I would say sitting and eating.
Yes.
Maybe especially eating.
Yes.
Because you have to do that.
My name is Lisa, mother of 8 and creator of the blog and YouTube channel Farmhouse on Boone. On this podcast, I like to talk about simplifying your life so you can live out your priorities. I help you learn how to cook from scratch and decorate on a budget through this podcast and my courses, Simple Sourdough and the Simple Sewing series. I also help people reach their goals from home through my business course, YouTube Success Academy. I will leave links to these resources in the show notes and description box below. Now let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. As many of you know, we are currently in the process of building our new home on a farm we purchased a little over, probably about a year and a half ago now. And with that comes a lot of decisions. Now, not just paint colors and cabinet colors, but the very infrastructure of buying raw land, where we put the driveway and how the house was oriented and the garage and all of these things and pieces. And we're thinking through gardens and how to make this raw land that has no, modern history associated with it, have a sense of place and time with the outdoor spaces. And I couldn't think of a better guest to bring on to talk about creating that story with your home, not only if you bought raw land in your building, but also if you just have a home in a suburban lot or maybe a historic home that doesn't have a lot of the original outside details left. Then Tessa Pinner from Garden Studio with Tessa Pinner over on YouTube. She also has the Garden Gab podcast. She does client work where she actually works with people to figure out how to lay out their gardens and create moments on properties where you can actually enjoy them and use them. But she also teaches people via her YouTube channel and her podcast. We had a really fun chat that I want to invite you to listen to. All right, editing Lisa coming here from the future. I want to really quick tell you all about a giveaway that we're starting today. So I had to jump on this episode and just tell you because it starts today. It runs for a week, so it runs until next Tuesday, September 9th. I have a recipe on my website, so if you go to farmhouseonboone.com, the very top recipe is my beginner sourdough bread recipe, and I am running a giveaway. So if you leave a 5-star review, we're keeping a spreadsheet with all the people who leave a 5-star review. And real quick, if you left a 5-star review when I asked for one on Instagram a few weeks back, you're going to get entered in it as well because I did that and then decided to run this giveaway, so I didn't want to leave you all out. So if you already left a review because you saw it on my Instagram, great. But if you haven't yet and you want to enter the giveaway for a $500 Amazon gift card, which I was thinking you could put that towards a grain mill if you already have one, maybe some other baking supplies or just whatever you want. But that's a suggestion because you might be wanting to get into bread baking. But if I've helped you at all learn how to make sourdough bread or sourdough in general, heading over to that beginner recipe, leaving a 5-star review with your name and email will enter you into the giveaway. We'll randomly select a winner next Tuesday, September 9th. Either way, it would be so helpful. I'd really appreciate it. Even if you don't win the giveaway, just to have that review and feedback on that main sourdough recipe that I use all the time that many of you love in your own kitchen. I put that out on Instagram a few weeks back and I was so grateful for how many of you went right over, left a comment, a 5-star review, and wanted to fill you all in on this giveaway. If you're a podcast listener only and you didn't hear about it anywhere else, make sure to head over to farmhouseonboone.com, click on that beginner sourdough bread recipe, leave a review, and you'll be entered to win. Well, it's nice to finally chat with you, Tessa. I was going to say in real life, but this is about as real life as we can do right now. Mostly We've been communicating through email. And you and I both thought this would make a really fascinating podcast episode. Basically taking raw land and giving it a sense of history and place by landscape design, because this is obviously a very relevant current concern for me, because we did buy basically just like a wide open field that we needed to put structures on, put a lot of infrastructure as far as all of the landscaping. So you have a presence over on YouTube where you talk about a lot of this stuff in gardening. And so the two of us have put our heads together a bit when in regards to my property, but I also want to just talk about properties in general. And just because if you're not building and you're not in a wide open field, there's still a lot of brainstorming to be done. So I'm thinking about my last place where we really didn't inherit any landscaping. There wasn't like a beautiful garden with a picket fence or any things that come back year after year. And so still it was just like a house on a hill. There wasn't, there wasn't this whole, like, I like when there's moments throughout the yard, like there's this little place where maybe people will gather. And it's interesting to me how much differently you use a space when it's been designed. So it's not just aesthetics, it's actually how you use and enjoy the space. So anyways, long rambly intro, but let's start with you introducing yourself and your channel and what you help people do.
Yeah, so I'm Tessa Pinner. I'm based in upstate South Carolina, so a little bit different of a zone than Lisa, but some similarities for sure. And I do garden design consulting. And then, as Lisa said, I have a YouTube channel, Garden Studio with Tessa Pinner, just my name if you search for that. And I did that just to basically reach a few more people with some of the things that I've learned in my professional work. And I feel like a lot of us, can't maybe hire a designer, but there are a lot of principles and things to be shared and learned. And even overarching ideas like this one is sort of a big idea. How do you design something that has a sense of place and really makes you feel something? And that applies to anywhere, not just somebody right in my area that I could be meeting with and helping. So I sort of like that double pronged approach of getting to meet with clients and doing direct work with design. And then also, of course, working in my own garden, which is like a laboratory, because sometimes I'll say, do this, not that, only because I've done it, and so there are certain things, know it to grow it or grow it to know it. That's the way it goes. Grow it to know it. So it's kind of a multi-pronged thing for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think so many people think of landscaping as impractical and growing vegetables and fruits and, food as practical. And sometimes I find this too with home design. There's a disconnect there to where it's almost seen as such a frivolous thing. Like, why do you even care? Like I've seen certain people say things like, well, but I already, if I have it like this, well, there's no sense to change it. And I push back on that because to me, beauty and form is very practical because it literally makes you enjoy your life better. And I think I think that I always say, well, I'm, very motivated by aesthetics, but I think everybody probably is. They just maybe don't realize it.
Yes.
Because they don't necessarily have an eye for it or, it's not something they've really noticed over the years. But then when they're somewhere where it has it, it's like, wow, I love being here. And what's the reason for this?
Right. Yeah. It's how a space affects you. And I think there are so many similarities with interiors and designing everything that you're doing and all that mental sweat that you're putting into the house and how you're going to use those spaces. There is a lot of similarities with how you think about your outdoor spaces. There's kind of this idea of, you have garden rooms, or it doesn't necessarily mean they have walls. I mean, they could have walls, they could have hedges, they could have brick walls, but more often than not, the idea of a garden room is like the thing you do in this space. So it could be like your dining outdoors, or your edible kitchen garden outdoors, or the fire pit, the place that you gather. And, you have big gatherings with church or your youth group or your family, and providing places to live outside and venues for experience. I think those are, you have a phenomenal view. And what are you going to do? You're going to either go on a walk around it, or you're going to sit on your porch and look at it. But like, to pull you out into the garden, to give you things to do, I think that is the role of designing these specific spaces with intention, because then you open up a chance for yourself to live and enjoy those that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, I think I learned this on a very, very small scale at our last place, We had this door that it went out from basically the mudroom to the garage. And that's pretty much all we do is just go out that door and then, come in that door. It was kind of our main door, even though it was the back door. And then one time Luke and I decided, okay, let's make a little gravel patio area. And then we put some string lights out there and we put some seating and a few little just plants. It was no big deal. But all of a sudden we were in that space constantly. And so I think it's interesting because we mostly neglect that. Like we think about the house, we think about the rooms, we think about the layout and how we'll use it. I think pretty much everybody does that when they think about a house. But then the outside is just a completely neglected area. And it doesn't have to even be like a big farm or some place with a view with mountains or a lake.
Most of us don't have that.
Yeah, no, no, most people don't have that to feel really useful. And I'm thinking about some places that I've been where we've enjoyed the outside time there so much. And it really just was because it was set up for it. So you're actually reclaiming something that you didn't have before with space you already have. And it doesn't have to be a costly or, a very fancy thing either.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think people think about, well, I have to have curb appeal, because when I go to sell this house, that's the role of landscaping. And I think that is a impoverished view as far as, well, maybe some people really don't enjoy being outside, but if you are a person who likes to be outside, I actually think your own enjoyment, and like you said, it transformed a pretty simple change, transformed a space that you would just walk through, like a throwaway space.
Yeah. Yes.
And, if you think of like a Charleston garden or a Charleston house, super tall, skinny, these teeny little garden strips on either side. And, those are some of the most delightful space. It's like not about the space, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not about the size. It doesn't need to be just this enormous thing.
No,
to be
in
really
fact,
useful.
It's kind of harder, I think, the more enormous it is.
It is.
You have to create some boundaries. Like, how can we get a wall here? Is it going to be because there's another structure? Or is it going to be because you put, like you said, a hedge or some kind of raised bed? When it's just a wide open field, it's actually significantly harder to create these cozy little outdoor areas.
That is so true. There's probably, you've heard this as far as the theories of architecture, but you have enclosure and then opening. And I might not be saying that right, but this idea of like, you want to be held in a space and then you want it to open. So you have the cozy nook that like maybe is the place you want to go read. And then you have the front porch, which is the place, or the big open kitchen, the place that you want to have more spaciousness in the house. And those have different feelings and different functions. But yes, I think if you sometimes, and this comes into the conversation with the raw land, like the more nothingness you have, the harder it can be, because you don't have those things to bump against and say, well, there's a house right there. So what are we going to do? It's like, well, you could do anything. And then where do you start?
And you need to do a lot. Like the bigger the space, the more you have to do, because you actually need a lot of pieces to make that cozy,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
But with our last place, it was smaller and it was up on a hill. So like, even though it was 7 acres, kind of the top of the hill before it would start to go down probably was only like 2 or 3. And there was a barn, a cottage, the farmhouse. And so we just added, and I don't feel at all like we did it perfectly, but we added like kind of areas in the bigger spots, but it wasn't hard to fill it out as much as if you're like, sometimes they have lots, like just a wide open lot around here. At least they do. That's like 6 acres and it's just a flat 6 acres. And I've seen people just put a house there and take like an aerial view to sell it. And I'm like, ugh, sorry, but it just looks so bad. Like you got to put some, I don't know what, like some kind of structure.
I know.
there.
It's like you've done the Monopoly thing where you've just like, bloop, plopped your little puzzle piece down like on this flat. They actually do that here too. And I think they do it everywhere because maybe it's the people spend all the effort on the house, or they just don't think when they are approaching a piece of land, like, well, it needs to be cleared. So let's clear it. Well, you don't necessarily need 6 clear acres if you're not doing full scale farming. So if you have a wooded site, And I saw a question kind of about this a little bit in the questions, but if you have woods and trees and things existing, you want to protect those a lot of times if you can, because you can't get it back once you've, gone in and
not really in
knocked
your
it down.
lifetime. Not to the extent you want it to be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When Luke and I were first married 17 years ago, we were on a super tight budget, and the only way that I could decorate my home and make it my own cozy space was by doing a lot of DIY and sewing. I've shared that for years on my YouTube channel, on this podcast, on my blog, and recently I put all of those resources together, all of the patterns, the tutorials, and then step-by-step instructions from getting a machine and threading it, learning about tension issues and the bobbin, all those things maybe over the years that have scared you away from sewing, into one course that I've called the Simple Sewing Series. If you've wanted to sew but have been intimidated by the process of getting started, or even if you're a more seasoned seamstress or sewist and you want to improve your skills, I really think that this will be a great resource for you. There's also a private community associated with it, so if you have sewing questions or you're excited to meet other people who are also getting started on their sewing journey, that's available with the course as well, and it's for a very affordable price. You can find my new course and all of the resources that go along with it over at bit.ly/simple sewing course. That's bit.ly/simple sewing course, all lowercase. That's where you can find more info and become a student. I've seen some really beautiful, though, I will say, when it comes to having, like, if you do have a wide open 5 or 6 acres with just a house in the middle, I have seen these beautiful layouts over on Pinterest where it'll say 5-acre farm. And then but it kind of almost assumes you have that, which is what I'd say most people don't have. It's just and so they put like the ducks here, and then they have the garden here, and they're beautiful, and the apple trees here. And so if you do have that, it might be really easy to start piecing it together with some of those layouts without having to deal with the variable of like the hill and the tree and other structures that if it's an older property might have.
Yeah.
But a little bit more straightforward.
Yes, that's true. I mean, and it's kind of like that same, if you're building a house, you get to just set it all, versus if you come into a renovation and you go, well, we have to work around this, and the chimney's already here, and there's this weird other thing that would be too expensive to move. So there's definitely that same thing with landscape, but it can make your job easier, because one of the overwhelming things when you can do anything is just knowing, well, where are we starting? And so the constraints help you. They really can help you.
Yeah, it's definitely a less overwhelming thing, I've learned, because of basically like the last 3 houses we've lived in have all been 100-year-old houses that have mature trees that already have some form of landscaping or buildings and structure, and then going to something that's just wide open. And I'm like, how do we even decide this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've done a lot of the hard work already in the where does the house go on the site. I know you thought hard about that. And then what's the relationship between these big permanent things like the barn structure, a garage structure, a pool structure, the house? These kind of make this, they have a conversation, with each other, and how you're going to live between those. And then automatically you have a footprint with like these things on it. And then everything between there is automatically your most zone of use. So I think one thing that's helpful to think about is this is actually a permaculture concept where you have these zones close to your house, and as it radiates outward, you get less and less picky or interventionist, with what you're doing. So anything that's between, let's say it is a suburban lot, like I've got a connected garage, but then I have like a little garden building, and then I have another bigger garage sort of barn structure that's separate. So I think, okay, what are, these spaces in between here? Maybe that's the zone 1 of things that it's you've got this defined footprint. And then a little further out, it's a little more relaxed. And a little further out, it's a little more relaxed, till maybe it becomes woods, or maybe one of those zones is pasture where it's like managed, in your case, animals, bush hogging, whatever it is you do to manage it, but it's certainly not something you're touching all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So there's these, like, you do the most amount of work close to your house and then let it relax from there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is true really wherever you are, like even in the smallest property, that's still true.
Yeah. So in a real small property, what kind of things would be examples of the further out things? Maybe like fruit trees
Mm-hmm.
or stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that actually got me interested in gardening about 10 years ago, was not really raised as a gardener with a whole lot of generational knowledge, like maybe our grandmothers, great grandmothers, and in certain parts of the country, there's more of that. I didn't have a lot of that, but it took moving to a property with fruit trees. And I, in the fall went, I think are those apples? I think those are apples. And then, I had to learn, what is this that I'm dealing with? And, try to prune them the right way. But they were just beautiful landscape trees. And yes, it could certainly be like, an edible thing, or it could just be you've got a more wild area, or you leave it woods if it's woods, or it's, you're not trying to plant a bunch of picky stuff. Maybe it is grass, that all you're doing is mowing. It really does depend on the situation, which is why it's funny to see those Pinterest things come up, like,
like this would work in like very few scenarios, but it's really pretty. And they're usually like an artistic rendition, they're like, when everybody was doing that, was it Beatrix pot? Like they were all like, it kind of looked like that with a property. And it's like, ooh, then you walk outside and you're like, okay, we don't have this at all.
Right. Or the expense to dig that pond for those ducks
there's a pond,
is going to be pretty steep. So I do think it's site specific, but it's so fun to make a list. Like, I think if you're approaching a project, whether it's, a house you're moving into or a house you're in or raw land, kind of going at it from a vision standpoint and a practical standpoint. And there's stuff in each one of those, like the vision of course, make the wish list. What is it that you want? All of the things. One thing that I encourage my clients to do is say, what are all the things you want to do outside? Because then you reverse engineer it and make spaces for those, back to the idea of like the garden rooms. So like, if you want to cook outside, okay, how do you want to do that? Is it something very intensely resourced, like an outdoor kitchen? I usually say most people don't need that. Put a grill, but make it a nice spot. Is it under a pavilion? You want shade. If it's 5 o'clock and you're grilling, you're going to not grill because you're going to be scorched, you know?
Yeah.
So there's just, make the wish list. If you are really approaching from zero, and I'd be curious to hear like what kind of path you guys took, but thinking about like, what's the topography of the site is probably, and like the natural raw features. If there's a hill, you can't ignore the hill. If there's water, if there's a certain kind of soil, if there's a big forest that you either have to keep or clear, it's all those things that you take account of. And then maybe you would want to survey, depending. If it's an open field and there's nothing there, you don't need a survey to tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, you might, depending on where exactly the property boundaries are, and you need to be marked on site. But for you and thinking about it, you don't necessarily need a survey. But one thing to think about is, where the house goes and how the approach to the house. And I just watched your video where the drone followed the driveway.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Did you choose that, or was that kind of how the
how
it just
totally
went?
chose it.
You chose it.
There was
good
about
job.
4 or 5 different viable options. And we did also have, do you know Brent Hall that does?
I do now because you're talking about him. I went and watched a bunch of his stuff.
So he actually did do a site visit for us before we started anything. Like when it was like, you had to get back there on a side-by-side, and he proposed something and we ended up having to go a little bit further up, but like it was basically what he had said. So we kind of had a lot of eyes on it. Like my dad put his input on it. Luke had his input. We had people who were actually going to do the work on it, put their input.
Yeah.
So
that's so smart.
There was tons of options, but yeah, I think we love what we chose. Like we feel like it was a really, like it really suits the place. Brent's whole thing was, instead of like, because I think sometimes people might be tempted to just go straight up the middle of the field because it, right up to the house. Well, one, I don't want to do that because I want actual pasture with cattle in it. But two, he said you want like peeks and glimpses, like as
Yes.
you're coming up so that you never see the whole thing until you're like there.
Mhm.
And I liked that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That sense of reveal, and you go through the trees and then it opens up. You have like the
Yes.
closed and then the open.
Yeah.
It's that same thing. No, I think he advised you well, and I think you did exactly the right thing. So I saw that and I went, yay, that's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny with raw land, like even that, like I don't, like I'm glad you appreciate it, but I don't think people even realize how big of a decision that is.
Sure.
Like, okay, raw land. Now, which way to the house? Like there's
right. Totally.
Yeah,
well,
infinite options.
If you were in suburbia, the driveway would really just go straight through it because there's no cows in the field. So these winding drives, there was a purpose to them too, of like they didn't have as much earthworks equipment, 100 years ago as they do now. It would have been much more expensive to say just like tunnel, if it didn't make sense with the lay of the land.
Yeah, you kind of have to
you have to follow
use the
it.
Land.
You have to use the land as your guide. And I think they were better at doing that 100 years ago and more because they had to a little bit more.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Because now it's easy. You can kind of cut a path wherever without being mindful of the place and the land that you have. So and there were some challenges. Like we had to put in a low water crossing for a spot that we didn't even really realize was a creek. It's not like the creek, but it's another. It becomes a creek really often. We've learned in the last year and a half that we've owned the place. But yeah, but even that's charming, like where it is. And then it fills with water a lot of times. And it's just.
That sounds fun, actually.
Yeah, I know.
It's those kind of things that makes the experience, again, like you said, 9 out of 10 people may not ever be able to pinpoint what it is. It'll just be, oh, wow, I feel a certain way. I can sense myself relaxing and I love going there.
Yes.
That's how most people will just feel based on what you've done.
Well, and earlier you were saying, some people aren't outside people. And I've always thought that too. Like some people just aren't. And there are definitely people who are more outside people than other people. But I wonder if it is the amount, like we're talking about creating these garden spaces and rooms, like you said. Is it more just like not being comfortable out there and making it to where you are comfortable? Everybody really would do well with some outside time, no matter what you say about yourself.
Oh,
like, I'm not an outside person. If you're comfortable,
no, it's good for you.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good point. And I think about like the ideas of generosity and comfort, like you said, in that aren't necessarily like wild nature. It's not, you go on a hike, you don't expect to be made comfortable.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's
kind of like, well, something's going to scratch you. Something's probably going to bite you. It'll be a great experience. You're going to get that benefit from being in nature, but it's not like necessarily a hospitable place.
No.
So how are we applying like a hospitable spirit to our outdoor spaces so that, like you said, maybe someone who's like, ooh, I'm not going to go on a hike because, that doesn't appeal to me, but will I sit by the fire? Will I sit at an outdoor table and hear the birds and the trees and get that benefit from being outside? Yes, I do think more people, if they put the work and kind of had the opportunity to experience a place like that, would want to be in it.
Yeah, because I can think of places where I would rather be outside. And I'm thinking this as somebody who has a lot of children too. So I'm also obviously like, is it more fun to be with the kids inside or outside? And there are certain places where, there's enough going on outside that it's just infinitely better to be outside with them. Then there's some places where it's like, well, let's just hunker down inside. And creating that space so that is your life where you can spend more time outside. I think it's important and it's worth the effort. And it doesn't mean you have to live rurally. Like right now, we live right in town and there's still lots of outside time. Like it took us a little bit to kind of figure that all out. And we did have to put some pieces in place as well. But there's, it's a small lot in town and there's still ample time where you want to be outside.
Yeah, I think a practical application of that we've gotten away from a lot of times in the way we landscape um, is fences in the front yard or some kind of barrier in the front yard.
Oh, yeah.
Like I
Oh,
remember
containment is everything. Yes,
containment.
fences.
So I have 3 children, so nowhere near
But
the
they're
number that you have,
small.
but
You
they're
have 3 very
little.
small children, which is like the main ones I'm thinking about. Because like the older ones, they
Terrifying.
can play outside literally anywhere. They're not
Sure.
going to go in the street. It's fine.
Right.
But the little ones are the ones I'm considering when I'm saying all this.
Yes. No, it's true. And my husband and I talk about one of the biggest regrets that we have with when we put all our fence infrastructure in and now some of it's aged. And so to add, it's like, oh, we could, but then it would look new. And then you have new and old. And we just haven't wanted to do it since was just not fencing the front yard because we realized we would use it so much more. And the feeling of safety, again, back to that, the hospitableness, like I'm not going to have someone else's kids say, go out, play in the front yard with my children. I'll keep all the children in the front yard. Like that would never happen.
Right.
Because I wouldn't feel safe about it. Right. So now I'm with you. We host a lot outside and built a pavilion just for that because the inside space, once you get more than 2 kids yelling at each other at the same time, it's like nobody can hear themselves. But if they can go run outside, suddenly a small house becomes still a place 9 months out of the year that you can host generously.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah, and there's no house big enough for a certain number of guests, and certain number of guests with children,
Sure.
like my sister and I, between the 2 of us, there's 15 kids. Then I have 2 more sisters. And between all of us, there's like 20 kids. There's not a house large enough that's just going to feel okay. Like
no, you're still going to send them outside. Go. Yeah. Please go outside.
They have to go outside. Like there is just no way. So that has been one of our main goals with our new property is somebody, and my parents are these people right now, which is great, but it'd be good to have like more than one option because we go crash their place. Like literally I've already been over there 2 or 3 times this week. They're not even home. They're on vacation, but just to swim in their creek, like they have a really good swimming hole. And then they also have a little tank pool and they have like little ride-on toys and the kids have their dirt bikes there. And so I want to have another place, another house where like just my immediate family can come and not overwhelm, people in public. Like if we go to a park, we're too much.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And just overwhelm anybody's house. Like I can't have everybody over here. There's not enough. It's the infrastructure is just not there. And so I think with hosting in mind, I can think of some places I've been. Actually, one is Katie Metka down in, actually the Metkas and the Crakies. They both are on YouTube, but they both have really tiny houses for their large families, but they have like outdoor pizza ovens and pavilions and they can host like 100 people. They're not even scared of who shows up because of how the outside is set up.
Yeah. And that goes back to that kind of generosity, which again isn't going to be necessarily look like 100 people for everybody, but it just might look like your family is comfortable or your children are comfortable. What does it take to make children comfortable outside? Well, not a whole lot, but they need to be safe and they need to have some stuff to explore, and you give them those things. And I mean, safety within reason. Like you could go crazy and say, never have any play equipment and never have any,
Yes,
kids are going to get hurt, but I mean,
that
like
the moms
cars
can mostly relax, knowing nothing bad's. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that all plays into it. I thought some of your guest asks or your responses to your questions were really good. The questions people asked.
Yeah.
One that I wanted to talk about here. Let me get.
Yeah. Are there any that stick out to you? We'll reverse this how we usually do it. Which ones were you excited to answer?
Well, some of them it's like, whoa, those are such big,
specific questions, right? Like
we should definitely tie the question about, just general giving a sense of place in history. I think tying that was one of my questions, which feels like cheating because I wanted to go look at other people's questions. But I think this one is a place to start. That's
okay. I wanted to get to that as well.
If you have it starts with house, I think. You choose the land, obviously, or if you're designing, you choose the design of the house based on what is going to make sense for this land. And for you, there are probably house styles that you liked that just wouldn't have made sense on the land that you bought. Then everything starts with that.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
that kind of historical adapted farmhouse dictates, I think, everything else about what you put outside, from the style and the materials you choose to how the construction methods are done. Because we've all seen, an beautiful old house where they come in with something that's extremely modern, and it just is jarring, or it looks like, okay, well, that is on trend right now, but the same, it's not going to be on trend in 5 years or 10 years. And I think there is a certain amount of cost, like when you are doing anything to your house, that you want to spend your money wisely. And the more timeless it is, it may cost a little bit more, but it's also going to last and work for longer. And stuff outside, like, an example might be what kind of wood you use, or the kind of stone works that's done. And are you doing the work to excavate and put in your infrastructure of, sub layers before you do a pea gravel? Are you just throwing down the weed fabric, which is going to make you crazy a year from now?
Oh, you're right.
Did you? Okay, so
we did that.
Can vouch for this. It makes you crazy.
Made us crazy.
I have literally never talked to anyone because people want a historical look, but you can't necessarily cut corners to get there. It would be better, to do a little bit at a time, knowing you're going to prioritize the quality of the materials. So, but one thing I think about, like, it is the things that you can cue are the materials and the construction methods. The way we use spaces now is a little different than someone who had actually lived in a farmhouse 100 years ago would be doing. They're not going to have your pool. They wouldn't have had, there are things like that where it's like, well, obviously
they don't have free time. We do.
No, they probably would have had an absolutely enormous functional garden because it had to feed them like the whole year.
Right. Exactly.
And these more recreational things would not have been present. So how can we reference that story of, this has been here a long time, these materials feel like they fit the house and fit the place? Okay, so the layout's not going to be, anything like necessarily what it would have been, but we can cue with the style. Okay, what would have been local to this area? And then, anything that is geographically appropriate as far as the stone that's quarried locally, the kind of timber that's cut locally. If there's anything that's hardwood that would even, be appropriate for outside, if you're doing bitches or things like that, that feels like it belongs to the place. But I do think it can be tempting to think, well, to look at Pinterest a lot, which is really helpful, but to know, like, you're trying to match up anything you do in the landscape to the style of the house, which is being matched to the style of the land or the use of the land. So it does come back to the land, but usually, like, it's via the house, and then that translates into the landscape, because you could have done probably a few slightly different things that would be appropriate for your land. Like, if you were a totally different person with a different aesthetic and wanted like an incredibly modern house, that also could have been very interesting. The landscape is going to be like nothing like that. So you could have taken that same land and, not tried to be historical with it. But I think because you did, everything goes back to, okay, what would look like it belongs with this house? And the more honest the materials are, the more they're going to look like they go. Like, less concrete, more stone. Okay, stone is more expensive. Maybe you go like a little bit at a time with your stone, or have accents of it rather than, tons and tons of stone, or prioritize where it goes, those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was thinking when you were talking about the pool, because, I completely agree. If it wasn't for having so many kids, I wouldn't even want the aesthetics of a pool at all. Like, but one thing Brent talks about is like creating a story over time. So at some
Yes.
point in history, they did this, that
Hmm.
history could have been like 5 years ago. But
Yeah.
I've been thinking about like the decking around the pool or whatever you call it. And
Hmm.
of course, concrete's ugly, but then
Hmm.
also, practically, we're going to have so many kids in
Hmm.
this pool. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So, like,
Yeah.
can't get away with
No.
grass. Can't get
Sure.
away with probably with even stone would be difficult with kids
Hmm.
running. And so there
Yeah.
is
It
this.
gets slick.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about earlier, like the things further away from the house. I'm like, you know what?
Hmm.
Because I agree. I love stone. In our last place, we put in, darn it, what do you call those pavers that are stone?
Big flagstones.
Flagstone. That was
Yeah.
it. Yep. And I'm like, it was so beautiful because the sidewalks, instead of being concrete, were flagstone.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to reserve all that kind of stuff for up by the house.
Yeah.
And then as we
Truly.
get down to the pool and the barn, just concrete, practical. I do
Hmm.
think we can, with like the fencing around the pool and some like raised beds and things, make it to where it's not so like concrete right there. But
Yeah.
yeah, trying to figure out how to have that balance too. Cause like you mentioned, expense too, like to put flagstone around like a pool,
Very pricey.
especially if
Yeah.
you want like 10 feet so you can, have kids like running and everything.
Hmm.
Probably not going to happen. But yeah, it's that balance, I guess.
It is. It totally is. And I think the whole point of, okay, this isn't something, like the grill, or there are going to be all these things that like they wouldn't have been there. But then, okay, can you cue, like you said, with the way you do the fencing or the sort of cottagey style of the plants? And maybe there's a winding path to get there, or maybe
Yeah.
there's some trees that soften. And then it's a thing that just is very functional that you don't think about. So I just feel like this is always the intersection of design, right? Like how do we want it to look? What can we afford to do? And what is going to work?
Right. Yep.
And
Those are the three things. You
those are
can't ignore
always,
any one of
you
them.
cannot ignore any one of them. So when it's like, okay, here's a little lightly traveled path that's not too big. Yeah, do the stone, because it's not too expensive and it's not functionally going to be. And if it's right by the house, then you wrap the house in that story. It totally is a judgment call though on all those other things. And you can do tinted concrete. Did you know that?
Well, one of my sisters just did that in her house, because they did like a pole barn style house and they tinted the concrete. But what would you recommend for that? Because I am trying to, like, this is like going to be a thing we're going to have to decide really soon.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of already thought we would have that done by now, but you know how everything takes like 12 times longer than you expect.
It does. It totally does. Yes, I've never seen a building schedule perfect yet.
Yeah.
Like in all the years that I've been
Yeah.
doing this. No, it's never exactly. And actually, I think you're doing pretty well based on, I think you're clicking along.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all clicking along. Yep.
It's clicking along.
Many years ago, when I was pregnant with my fifth child, I decided to add YouTube to my internet business to diversify and open up a whole world of opportunities. Many things have changed about YouTube since that day. A lot of things, honestly, have remained the same, but I love to educate students on how to create an income from home through YouTube with my YouTube Success Masterclass, which you can find over at bit.ly/farmhouse YouTube masterclass, bit.ly/farmhouse YouTube masterclass, all lowercase. There I share the mistakes that I made when I first got started, how you can achieve success faster, and how to earn a diverse and stable income from the YouTube platform. So if you are interested in using video to reach a wider audience for a business you already have, or you're just curious about what it might look like to incorporate YouTube into your life as a homemaker or a stay-at-home mom, go ahead and check out that free masterclass that I put together for you.
So if you have a native stone that you know that you'd want to incorporate for certain things, get a piece of that stone. Like you cannot replace having actual physical, like anything else. Like you need to get a piece of the stone of whatever is either quarried near you that you know you want to use, or something that's shipped in because you like the color better and like, you know, it's from a certain vein. And I mean, there's always just variations in like how gray is it, how blue is it, how orange is it, you know, based on the mineral content of the rocks. So that piece to have. And then you go to your concrete contractor and you say, I want to look at all your integral color samples.
Oh.
So all of the companies that provide basically that dye that goes into the drum, they color the whole drum. And you say, I want to see your sheets of all of these. And can I please have some to take with me? Thank you. And they should do that for you. Give you basically, it's almost like a paint chip chart.
Oh, okay. No, I don't think I realized how many options there are.
There are a lot of options. If you've got a good concrete, I mean, just ask for it and they will figure it out for you if it's not something they already do, because I think you can cheat in a good way on concrete and make it much more like you just don't see it with your eye when you've already established, okay, here's the stone. And then if this concrete is a very comparable tone, you don't go automatically to that white, like suburbia, and then it stains with every bit of mud. And if you know that what you're describing, that's a kind of a big deal that you want it to get right. They could do a sample for you,
right?
If you ask for it. So if you say, I want to be sure that I love this, you'll pay a little bit, but to have them do, okay, here's the color that I think I most want to do, and I want a sample of it. I want to see it. So, and I think asking for that, you can also do finishes, special finishes on your concrete. There's something called a salt finish that it used to be that they would throw actual rock salt like into the top of the concrete, and then the concrete would set and then they'd rinse the salt away. So it gave this interesting kind of like pocked finish.
Okay.
Now, and it was not like super, it wasn't like stamping a fake, you know, because it was actually made by something real. That makes sense?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I think you could just ask like, okay, what are your options for integral color and what are your options for any specialty finish? And most of the specialty finish will be horribly tacky, like you would not want it in a million years. But some things might be like, okay, that actually gives it something that just doesn't look like a suburban driveway.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like whether it's a brushed finish, sometimes they can do a brushed finish, which just can also kind of help with traction when you have a lot of kids running and things like that.
Yes.
So I just think if you like know that there are options and you dig into it with your concrete provider, then you'll feel like, okay, this is actually the best version of this that I could get. And it'll look good if you kind of follow down that track.
Okay.
Something else to figure out, I know.
Yes, right. Something else to think about. Okay, so with when somebody has raw land, I think it's helpful too to think about it with a really long vision, because a lot of this can get overwhelming. Like, okay, we could have this room and this room, and you know, we only have so much budget, so much time. How do you recommend somebody casts a large vision, but then plugs away at it over many, many, many years?
Yes. So I think probably the number one thing is this, the first thing I told you, is plant trees. Because if you have the vision to have, you know, this feeling of history and maturity, a lot of that is from mature trees.
Yeah.
You know, like the old farmhouse with the chestnut tree right there, or the oak, or something that would have been, you know, just actually a lot of times it's not in a spot that always makes sense. Like if we're drawing a landscape plan, like directly in front of this, or like this perfect symmetry with trees, a lot of times there's this feeling of like just a little bit of wonkiness with, you know, wherever that is, and getting trees planted quickly and not actually necessarily worrying if it's not perfectly in the right place, because if it evolved, you know, you want to try to make a good choice, like what's the angle of the sun? Where might you want to block, a ton of light? Do you really want to make the north side of the house darker? That kind of thing. But if you think, okay, over time, people may not have thought about this too incredibly hard. So then if you plant something and have to respond to it, that'll just sort of add to the character
Right. Yeah.
of the place, because that's, if you inherited a farmhouse with a big tree, you wouldn't be like, it needed to go over 5 feet.
Yeah.
You know,
because like when you're saying that to the north, I was picturing my last farmhouse, and I'm like, we had a huge tree just outside the north window that probably
How dark was it?
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
just funny because I didn't really ever think about it because I didn't have to make the choice.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there is so much like that could just get overwhelming. But that's always the first thing I tell people is like, you can't fast track a tree. I mean, you can spend more money and get one that's dug, and you have to make sure you really keep it watered and baby it for a year or two. But that is one of the quickest things to do. And then as far as like, I think it's worth getting a little bit of help after you've done as much as you can on your own, like as a kind of like you did with Brent Hall, or like you did with, I know you worked with a landscape architect on some of the space layout, because some of that, like it needs to go here, not there, or you want at least this much space for X, Y, and Z, aren't necessarily things you might know as a, just as a layperson. Like there'd be a lot about designing I don't know.
Yeah. They think of things that I'm like, yep, never would have thought of that.
Right. So I think having a plan that's just a concept, and this is something I do with a lot of people, and it's one of my most favorite things to do, is to say, okay, give me the wish list. Let's take a look at as many things as we can about this land and say, if you're here for 50 years, what do you want it to be? And go with a concept that includes maybe blocks for all of those things, to where you could add them later. Like maybe the only thing that happens is you get the driveway in, you get an area right around the house where you can put your outdoor table, or you have a spot to do your outdoor cooking, or you do a little kitchen garden. But someday I want to do a fire pit, and I want an orchard, and I want these other things. Like, okay, just so you don't have regrets later on, I think it makes sense to work with somebody just a little bit, or if you're kind of a visually inclined person, to have an aerial shot. So that could be Google Earth, that could be a drone, that could be a survey, and you draw on it.
Right.
So, because that can be really fun. And I'm not trying to say like you can't do this if you don't hire somebody. I think some people will need to hire a little bit of help, and some people might not, if they had that way to draw on. And did you, when you were designing your house before you took your stuff to Brent, did you do like scaled drawings based on a ruler and that kind of thing?
Me personally, no. No, I don't know how to do any of that stuff.
Okay. So, and I think that's where it gets kind of like, you can learn how to do that. Sure. It's possible. Everybody's got a ruler lying around somewhere that could tell you like, for every inch it's this much.
Right.
But it is kind of a skill that you have to develop. So I think working with somebody who that's what they do, even just for like, hey, help me draw this so that the spaces are the right size and make sense. Or take a look at this. I put the garden here and the such and such here and this, and they might say, oh, well, you put your garden too close to that very large tree. Or it's on the north slope. You're not going to want to put a garden there because it's going to get a lot less sun. Just things like that. But I always encourage people to go for the big view.
Right. Like, the big picture. Yeah.
In a way, in an actual drawing.
Yes. When you can frame it. Like you sent me a drawing, and I also did consult with Ecclesia Designs, and he gave me a drawing, and I like the idea of like keeping those, maybe even like framed on the wall. And then over the years, be like, okay, this year we're going to put in those trees there.
Yes.
Because he said, okay, you can hire an art or a landscape to come put all this in. I'm like, we're not probably going to do that.
Yeah.
But I like having the vision for what it all will be. And then over time, we can DIY, plugging away at that. Just putting in this kitchen garden right here, and then putting in this table here. And there's, just giving the vision for it. Yes. I could see how in my last house that would have been so helpful, because I don't really feel like we necessarily nailed it. Like we put in a cute little garden area, but it could have been so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it might be that, okay, because I feel confident that this is where I want it to go, I'm going to do my I'm going to do my beds and I'm going to do them in the ground. And then if I love it, I've reserved the space, I could build the raised beds.
Right.
I mean, there are some like really, and that's a much more expensive thing than just, having your bed in the ground versus going for the trouble of the infrastructure to build it up. Or like you've done with putting your pool in from day one. That's a hard thing to add later. As far as if you had gone ahead and done more landscape around your house, you would have been like, okay, well, what part of this do you dig up with all the
give up for the pool?
Right.
Or you should at least know where it would go if you do want to do it a few years down the road. Like almost put some like stakes in the ground and just just pretend it's there. Maybe make your paths knowing that it's going to be there.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I love that you just brought that up, because one of my very favorite things to do is get those little, either the landscape flags, which are, a little bit ugly, but they come in yellow and white, and just irrigation companies will use them. You'll see them like stuck in the ground, or you get like a wooden stake that you hammer down in, and then you can do the kind of probably what you did with the footprint of your house to figure out where that goes. You can do the exact same thing with your outdoor spaces, because if you can feel it, if you can walk through it, like, here's how I think I want my outdoor dining to work. Let me outline the footprint of the space and put stakes in. And then let me put stakes in for the size of the table. Let me walk around that. Does that feel comfortable? Like, again, you might read in a book that it should be X, Y, or Z, but like, does it feel right?
Right.
And you'll get a sense, even if you're not doing a scale drawing yourself, or you don't have somebody to do that for you, if you could go outside and measure and do your stakes, and that feels right, then you can measure it afterwards and say, what was that felt right? And kind of, I like to do both, but you could do that even if you skip kind of the drawing stage of like, maybe the topography limits you, and it's like, okay, how much would I need? And then you can always reverse engineer and measure stuff. But that's a great way. That's a great way to know. Or if you're ordering an outdoor table,
right?
How big does it need to be? Okay, well, go stick it in the ground and see what feels right. Or a pavilion or a terrace or anything like that.
Yes, I think that makes a ton of sense for when you're not doing everything at once, because we're also not doing even close to everything at once, because there's a lot of things that we want to add over the years. We mostly just wanted to get like the big pieces in place, and it'll probably look pretty out of place for several years. But staking things out and just having a vision long-term for how you can fill the spaces out over the years, little projects you can work on when you have the time and the resources to do it over the years, I think makes it exciting too, because it gives you something to look. I mean, I don't know. We like having something to change, to look forward to add. And what fun would it be to do it all at once, right? If you could, which I don't even know who could do that.
Well, I do, because
you work with people.
Yes. But it isn't most of us. And I will say, like, there is something about doing the first step and then living with it, and then doing the next step and living with it. Sometimes your ideas get better.
That's what I'm always thinking too. Yeah.
What you thought they do. Or you're like, oh, I didn't predict that we would always go out the door this way. Just like that sense of like what deer do in a landscape. Like, what do the children do just by themselves? And then you can respond to it and put the play area where they're already going. You can't always know those things.
No, you can't. And we talked about this actually a lot with our current house, because the one in town that we're living in, we thought we knew where the kids would play. And we even fenced in like a whole thing, and it actually wasn't right. Like, and I don't really know why. It must be because of where the door is in the garage, and like where we put the bikes. Like, it could be tweaked, but it's not what we thought at all. And I think that's partially why I think it's wiser to not do everything at once, because you can you can put the stake somewhere else. You can pencil your drawing, like make it a little different once you discover what door do you actually go out of? Like you think, but then you might actually, like I don't ever use garages, even though we've had them. And so I'm going to pull in the garage. I'm going to go out this sidewalk and in the back door. Or am I going to literally pull up front of the house literally every time? Probably. I don't know. Maybe. And so figuring all of that out.
Yeah, for sure.
Over time. Yeah.
Right. And you'll realize like, oh, actually the part that I see every day multiple times because this is where I end up parking, I care more about that. And you can only care hard about a certain amount when you're doing it all yourself.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Another question we had from the audience is tips for overcoming analysis paralysis when starting a new project.
That's a good one. I think you can throw the net wide with, whether it's, I love actual books and I know you feel the same way.
Yes.
But if you go on, I feel like the internet is this sort of quagmire. It can just suck you and suck you and suck you. And if you have a book, you are limited to the book, right?
Yes. So that's why helps. You probably have analysis paralysis because there's too many. Internet. There's too many choices.
There's no curation. No, like and you're curating.
I always think that when I start getting on Pinterest, looking up things, I'm like, this doesn't help.
No.
Like you're not going to walk away with a decision. No. Actually, you're going to walk away with 12 more options and
100 more things on your board. Then you're like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And then I can't even like take action from it. Like it doesn't move me in the direction of making any decisions. And I'm a person who naturally struggles with decisions especially when it comes to anything design related. And so I agree with you. I think that's probably the first thing is just get off
some
Pinterest.
Books. Get off Pinterest and get some books.
Well, what are some books you recommend?
It depends on if it's
the style.
Yes. If we're talking like laying out the space or if we're talking like plants. But there's one that I thought was really helpful that just came out. Actually went to I have this design book cabinet and I was like, I got to have some actual names because I know she's going to ask this. There's one that came out pretty recently called How to Design a Garden by a British, I know, I appreciate how straightforward, a British designer named Pollyanna Wilkerson. Okay. And I think for anybody who's looking for just a broad brush overview of like, what might you want to think about if you're trying to, and even if you're going to hire somebody, what questions do you ask? Like, what color is just there's some specific questions that would bring up. I think that's helpful. And then I maybe could just give you a list for the notes, but depending on want like I saw one question in there about like, how do I make edible landscaping beautiful? There is another designer, Christian Douglas, who just wrote a book called Food Forward Garden, where he's basically like, you have to design, the spaces really well.
Yeah. But then how especially if space is a concern, making it beautiful and edible and time is a concern, right?
Right. Yeah, it all totally is. I mean, I always am very drawn to like the British style of gardening, partly because I think they have a lot more of that historical precedent to go on than we do as much here. I feel like we have, the very agricultural roots in America.
Yes.
Or like super grand estates that it's like, well, like I love visiting Monticello, but that's not.
Well, even the idea of talking about landscaping automatically sounds like, okay, well, you must be richer than me. Like, right.
And there is this divide, I think, of like, if you're doing anything optional, then it is a luxury.
Absolutely.
Item.
Not practical. Doesn't make sense. Yes.
So, I mean, yes, there is some of that, but like, why do we want to eat good food? And beautiful, why do we want to wear beautiful? There is that quotient of like, you can't always quantify it, but also you can when it comes to your health and your well-being and how much you use a space. But there's those classic like British gardeners that have written about cottage gardening specifically would be like Monty Don. Everybody loves
Monty Don.
Everybody loves Monty Don. And I'm for good reason. He's written a lot of really helpful books.
And he has some YouTube, like there's also great YouTube content like yours.
Oh, there is.
Because when we were saying the internet, I must say, I don't feel that way when I watch YouTube. I come away with actionable things. It's a slower form.
The slow. Yes.
Yeah. It's scrolling Pinterest and Instagram. You come away and you're like, okay, I have no clue what to do. I'm so like, there's a million options, what to choose.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So I do think if you find somebody whose work you like, whether that's a designer or just a person who's living, the way following specific people is a little more, I mean, you can find great things on Pinterest. I don't want to villainize that because I certainly spend time on there too. I use it all
the time.
I use it, but it's not, like you said, it's not going to make decisions for you.
Right.
So you set your own, it's sort of like, going into ChatGPT and like ChatGPT is not going to make decisions for you either. It's going to help you in certain ways based on the quality of what you feed it. And I think it's the same thing with any kind of search or assisted, design tool. So yeah, I think my first tip would be books. And then your house architecture style is going to limit you. So those are the books you choose. And the amount of time you have is going to limit you. So that changes your, direction too. I think there could be the more built structure often you have in a garden, like let's say, paths that are never changing, walls, things that are not alive, the less maintenance a lot of times you're going to have. So I heard one, if you have not a huge amount of time, maybe you put your garden energy like you guys did into one terrace, that it's like, this is the thing that we're going to use a lot. Like rather than doing a little bit here and a little bit there and like a few plants here, sometimes ironically, the thing that will make the most difference is a hardscaping thing, not plants. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. What are some examples? Cause I feel like that's what we lacked at our last house was I didn't ever figure out like hardscaping stuff that I think I see on other gardens and I don't necessarily realize why theirs looks so much cozier and there's boundaries.
So it is your surfaces, your walls and your floor. And then, what's on the ground, and stone is less maintenance than even grass. So, and it makes you be able to put furniture on it. Walls can be hedges. They could be fences. They could even just be like you plant a few trees close together and that gives you the feeling of an enclosure, or like we talk about like the ceiling space in and out. If you have a tree, then you have a ceiling over you. And that's part of a thing that makes you feel comfortable. But I think somewhere to sit and somewhere to eat are probably the two things of like, if you want to what are you going to want to go do outside? Somewhere to sit and somewhere to eat. Because if you can sit and watch your kids play,
right, that's
a win. Or if you can, I don't know how you are, but I rarely just like sit because I don't have time.
Yeah.
But I will sit to eat, and I will sit sometimes to watch my kids.
Yes. Yes.
Or as part of like a social thing, entertaining, that sort of thing. So I think if you don't know where to start with, okay, what do I want to focus on first? And let's say someone, isn't necessarily a huge edible gardener. If they were, that would be the place they start. Somebody who really wants a garden is going to get a garden.
Yeah.
It's even if it's in pots or whatever for the time being. But if you really don't know what else to prioritize, I would say sitting and eating.
Yes.
And maybe especially eating.
Yes.
Because you have to do that. You have to do it.
Right. And eating outside is it's so special. I love eating outside.
It's so special.
And lighting. So like string lights create little moments. In our current house that we're living in, it's an old house, and the previous owner, she passed away, but she loved this place and she lived here forever. Oh. And she has in one of the yards like a, what do you even call it? It has
A pergola with like a lattice?
It's big. It's probably like it's square. You can go inside of it. And
Oh,
it's
wow.
all grown up with, I put it on my picture of this app the other day. Now I can't remember what it was, but it's various vines. And like in the fall and winter, we didn't necessarily know that, but it's like, and this is just a wide open yard. And in the middle of it, there's this square structure that it's all shaded just because it grows up with vines in the summertime. And I'm like, this is just neat because you could bring a table and chairs out here, put a few string lights in there, and you have a whole thing. And it took time because I don't know how long it takes for vines to get to the level that they are. Like they're very mature. But over the years, now there's this beautiful little spot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that brings up a very good point of you just have to think about the angle of the sun because no one is going to want to sit and be scorched.
No.
Wherever it is. So, sometimes if you have no trees and you're waiting for them to grow, then it does make sense to build a little structure of some kind. It sounds like maybe, there's lattice that is or some kind of trellis system.
Yeah.
That's a lot cheaper to build than like a solid building with a roof. And then it shouldn't, depending on, where somebody lives and what kind of vines they'd be dealing with. But a year or two, you can get a lot of growth on the right vines if you, keep them watered and put them in good soil. So within a season or two, you could have more shade that way from like a pergola. I love that. And then, like you said, it's like a little place to go. And
yes,
the kids, do the kids love it?
I thought they'd play in there more. They really don't. But there is a trampoline nearby and a swing set. So maybe that's why. And there's also a tree that they climb very nearby to it.
They want to be doing stuff.
Yeah. But I'm like, well, this is neat. And it's kind of in a location where like it should be closer to the house, I feel like, because if it was, I think we would use it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot this house has taught me because it was a person that really loved landscaping. Like the whole back patio is brick, which is beautiful. However, it never stays sunny enough back there. And they're always...
Is it slippery?
It's slippery. It's like slimy. Like, and I thought, certainly it'll completely dry out in the summer. But because it has so much tree cover back there that never happens. And so it's beautiful. Like having a whole brick patio is so pretty. But I'm like, I don't know if you have a wide open, if there's not a lot of shade, that might work great. But it's a little.
Yeah. And there are considerations like that with, you're going to get growth pretty much on anything if it's in shade like that.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So I know people always want to know, like, what's the least maintenance of whatever? And it's like, that's not always, sometimes it's the right question, but it isn't always the right question of like, you don't have a no maintenance garden, no matter what you do. It's like I heard an a landscape designer joke, like you go with interiors and you put a couch there and the couch stays. Well, we put, our equivalent of the couch and the couch dies, or the couch gets a disease or the couch gets fungus, because of the shade. So there is a lot that like, I think having a knowledge of those things. Yeah. You would assume, it's brick. What could possibly affect something that sturdy? Well, turns out.
Yes.
There's always something.
There's always something. And maybe that brings us full circle as to why not everybody focuses on these things. But then I think we've also made a case for why it would be worth it because we do know how valuable it is to spend time outside. So that being said, tell the listeners about your YouTube channel where they can find inspiration on knowing some of these things, because I think that's one of the top reasons why people don't pursue creating gardens is it sounds overwhelming. It seems like I don't have the knowledge and the skill set. Like my couch is going to die. Like it's easier just to throw a couch in there, So tell them where they can find you and all that you offer. And then you also said you have a podcast coming up. I don't know when that's coming out, but
yes, we've just, it's a friend of mine named Molly Hendry. She's a garden designer as well in Birmingham. So we have kind of a Southern connection going on. And our podcast is, by the time this comes out, it will be live on iTunes and wherever you get your podcast, called Garden Gab. We thought, the whole idea of a garden club, I kind of love it, but also who has, at least not in my stage of life or your stage of life, to go listen to people chit chat about what they're doing in their gardens or share plants or share ideas or anything like that. It's like, that's not my season of life.
Right.
But I would love to hear somebody talking about that and just sharing ideas. And it's like, here's what I'm doing in the garden this week, and a lot of little tips and tricks like that. So that's what I'll be doing. That'll be Garden Gab, the podcast. And then I've been doing YouTube, actually, thanks to you, for a year and a half now. And that is at Garden Party Studio, or Garden Studio with Tessa Pinner. And it's really just me in my garden, which is like my laboratory, talking about some really practical stuff like, what did I do wrong here? What do you do about invasive plants? Or how can you think about privacy hedges, all the way to, here's a really fun planting I did with a bunch of bulbs, and here's what it looks like after a certain amount of time. So fun stuff, practical stuff. And I do have a website, but that's mostly for clients to reach out to me. So I do client work locally, not so much at a distance. Although, if it's just a concept like what we worked together, that can be something that still could be really helpful. And then anytime I'm not doing that, I'm definitely chasing my children. So that's where we are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we will leave links to all of that down in the description box or the show notes below, depending on where you're getting this podcast. So thank you so much, Tessa, for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa. It was a pleasure to be on.
Thanks, as always, for listening to the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. My husband Luke and I and our 8 kids work together side by side on our little homestead and use our blog, podcast, and YouTube channel to reach other homemakers, home cooks, and homesteaders with practical recipes in daily family life. For everyday sourdough recipes, make sure to check out our blog, farmhouseonboone.com. And to dig deeper, we do also offer a course called Simple Sourdough over at bit.ly/farmhouse sourdough course. That's all one word, bit.ly/farmhouse sourdough course. If you're looking to learn how we earn an income online, check out my YouTube course at bit.ly/farmhouse YouTube course, all one word.